we try to do our best to get you the most interesting and informative guests that we can find, and today is certainly no exception. We're sitting outside right now at I'm going to say a seasonally appropriate temperature. It's only a single degrees out there. It's some reports say it's about 9. It feels like it's closer to about 7. It's a bit foggy out there, and it just, we woke up today feeling like October. We're headed to a high of just 23, and I'm just going to take a moment and say that what a incredible feeling it was yesterday to just see so many people participating in wearing the orange shirts for recognizing the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. But most importantly, what a joy it was to see all the families together, and just the total multi-generational presence of all kinds of people who gathered, to participate in the walks, various different powwows that were going on, the gatherings at the different parks. It was something like thousands and thousands of people took the time to sit with each other and think on our relationship to Original peoples here and our relationship with each other. And I think there was just a lot of healing and heartfelt centeredness yesterday that I hope ripples out for a long time. And as many people have said, it's certainly not just one day that we should practice this awareness, but every day. And I hope for many people that were introduced to some of the notions around the work of truth and reconciliation, and maybe heard some of the stories of elders and survivors and 60 Scoop folks for the first time, that this is the beginning of that good work for them. So I just thought I'd add that, because I felt really moved from yesterday. Were you out at all, Mary Jane? Did you see some
No,
of the
I wasn't. We had our completion ceremony for our class, but there was
Fantastic.
Commentary about people walking to the ledge and all that. And one of our participants, he had an orange T-shirt where recognized that, and he also made a comment that it was the color of the Dutch nation. So it was kind of interesting, and we did acknowledge what was happening, and also had several readings from Aboriginal teachers. So we ended the day that way. So it was acknowledged. Yeah, thank you for your introduction, Kristen. And we do have a very full time on our radio program, and maybe too many things we try to put in, make it happen. But anyway, just a little quick rundown of what we're going to be talking about. We have a guest who I will introduce shortly. After that, we will be talking about continuing some discussion on healthy soil, how it pertains to our food, and some information on whole foods, what that means. And then also I'll try to get some type of 5G update from the presentations that were made on to the, I think it was September 29th, to the City Hall. And so on that note, I would like to introduce our guest, who is a return guest. Her name is Marie LeBlanc, and she's originally from northern Manitoba, but she lived in Winnipeg before moving to Alberta. And she holds a Bachelor of Arts in Human Geography and Sociology from the University of Manitoba. In Winnipeg, she participated in the Making Our Mark 11 printmaking mentorship program at Martha Street Studio, the Artist in Residency program at Art Beat Studio, and Art Salon program at Arts Accessibility. So Marie has sensitivities, though, to chemicals, both indoor and outdoor environments. She suffers from both multiple chemical sensitivities, also called MCS, and exposure to electromagnetic fields, or EMF, making it impossible for her to live in society. She is a survivor with a lot of ingenuity and strength, and also an artist and maker of films about MCS and EMF. One of her films, titled Awareness and Acknowledgement, won the Platinum Award for Best Documentary in June 2020. And currently she's involved in an exhibition from September 24th to October 9th, displaying her art prints. Marie is a self-advocate who brings awareness of the reality of MCS and the struggles of those like herself that they experience just simply to survive. And so we'll be talking today to Marie about her disease, how that has impacted her life, and how she survives, and also about the exhibition she's involved with. So welcome to Wooden Spoons, Marie.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the wonderful introduction.
So how is the weather out there in Alberta? Now that you heard about a wonderful foggy morning, which is so beautiful.
Well, it's still dark out, and I haven't looked at the weather, but it seems a little cool. So that's as far as I get as being the weather end.
Okay, that's quite all right. Yeah, so Marie, would you want to just tell us when you developed your symptoms of multiple chemical sensitivity and electromagnetic sensitivities, and how these symptoms manifested themselves and how you came to be diagnosed? And I understand that the diagnosis is not often available, and often when it is done, it's through the lens of psychiatry. So do you just want to define the disease and tell us about your own symptoms and how it came about?
Okay. It's known as environmental sensitivities, which includes multiple chemical sensitivity, electromagnetic hypersensitivity, and mold exposure, and many other overlapping conditions. And it's like having adverse reactions to many things in the environment, such as perfumes, building supplies, cleaning chemicals, mold, electronic devices, cell towers. There's so many things, and it can be irritating to simply just totally debilitating for someone, including myself at times. For me, it took a long time to diagnose. I was seeing doctor upon doctor, and I can't tell you how many appointments I would have in a day, in a week, if not just so many in a day. And then when I, started finding the doctors who understood, we felt that it's probably right from birth for me, and it just continued from there. But we had to take an assessment of everything from my whole life. And certain symptoms for me include things such as like being tired, headaches. I could even have kidney failure, concentration, gastrointestinal, heart, so much pain I can't explain, and the list goes on and on and on. And it's so hard to live with this condition because my way of coping is basically avoiding things at the moment. And I was sent, we knew what I had, so I was sent to Nova Scotia in in like 2011 or 2012, and they diagnosed me, and I came back to Manitoba, and I couldn't afford the magnesium IV treatments that I needed because I was really low in magnesium. I couldn't get the right housing I needed. And then in 2017, I was referred to an environmental doctor in Alberta. And from there, it's been a challenge because I have to go to the desert and live in the middle of winter.
Mm-hmm. So there are environmental doctors, and they seem to be the ones that are attuned to this phenomena of people with all these symptoms, and where the cause seems to be elusive.
Yeah, they go through your whole history, and then they all the exposures, where you worked, where you lived, everything. And it's really good to have a doctor who goes through all that. At least we're getting to the root cause.
Okay, and then, so you mentioned all the triggers that you have, the chemicals, molds, and electromagnetic radiation, and also Wi-Fi was one of them you mentioned before to me. And so when you're feeling these symptoms, and how do you react? How do you find relief? What are your options in this situation?
Well, right now it's pretty much avoidance. So I avoid, well, I shouldn't say that. It was avoidance. still definitely is avoidance. I've been trying to put myself out in the world a little bit, given we have COVID happening as well. Because I've lived in the desert, my thing is going and living in the middle of the desert in my van, because I can no longer tolerate indoor housing. So that's been a challenge, but it also helped in some ways where I can go into some buildings. I still react so bad, but I'm just trying to see what I can and can't do. How is it helping me? Like, that's pretty radical, is going to live in the desert. I'll take things like vitamin C, vitamin D, certain foods that I'm eating. There's so many things that I'm doing that I guess it's not the norm, especially going to the middle of the desert. But so many of us, that would help so many of us, because we would have the better air quality than some of the indoor air quality that we're having, that's exacerbating our symptoms.
Yeah, so you have to, you are living in a van, and that in itself is another issue, or another, certainly a challenge. It must be terribly hot to go to the desert and live in a van, and as well, living where you are in Alberta during the, I guess it's not so bad in the summer, but how do you cope with living in a van? How do you keep from getting too hot or too cold, or,
Well, okay, so I don't have an issue with getting too hot, because I love the heat, because with certain reactions I'll get hypothermia, and I'll measure my temperature way below even what they say, hypothermia is. So for me, getting too hot is not a challenge, really. Maybe when it's 100 above, but that only hits like 100 above maybe in May. And the rest of the winter while I'm down there, it gets really cold at night, like down to 0, if not lower. And during the day, and it's not like that hot during the day for me down there. And so at night, what I do is I'll use hot water bottles, or what are those things you put in your gloves, to put heat in your gloves? What are they called? Those little.
Yeah, I know. They're kind of like a gel material.
Or something, yeah, and you put them in your gloves to keep your hands or your feet warm, things like that. I use those when I'm sleeping. So it's I don't have normal heat. I at the moment I can't afford the expensive something that I would need that would be really expensive to put into the van that would heat at night. But really, all my electricity basically goes off at night, anyways.
So you spend a good part of your time in Arizona during the winter, and you also there's housing in Arizona for people with chemical sensitivity. I think it's her last name is Malloy. I can't forget her first name. We interviewed her once.
Susie, yes.
Susie Malloy, and you do connect with some people who share your symptoms, share this diagnosis. Yeah. So there is a kind of a community. You do have a community.
Yeah, actually, when I go down, I a lot of times go through there and meet the people that I have met. And there's a lot of people down there, even though so many are living a life such as myself. They're also giving. They're also giving with, helping with information, how to survive. And that's what I totally love is when I do meet up with them, and the ones that my friends that have, I think we've made lifelong friendships. They're always asking me, how am I doing? They're always like, do I need help with this or that? And it's just amazing.
Well, that's certainly wonderful that can happen, because it's quite incomprehensible for ordinary people to imagine having to live outside of society and be alone. That is quite extreme, and it's amazing that having the coping skill that you have developed to do that. So. Let's just talk about how you survive. Just how do you? So where do you live, for instance? You can't live in urban areas, so how do you find a place to live? And how do you cook for yourself?
Okay. Oh, that's a good one, actually. So for finding a place to live, I actually find like Bureau land management, like free land, and I will drive and drive. So I spend a lot of money on gas, just trying to find a place to stay. And then I get all set up, and then sometimes somebody will have a campfire, so then I have to leave. So I'm always in the escape mode, I guess, always ready to leave. It's quite a challenge. So I will just, like I say, continue, and I'll find people who actually are very kind, and I can stay in their driveway. They don't understand, what's going on, but they're so kind, and that's what I totally love. And as for cooking, so I have a solar cooker from GoSun, and within an hour, it takes an hour to cook a baked potato. So I'll cook, I'll use the sun. I also have a 12-volt, it's called a ProMaster cooker. It looks like a lunchbox, so I'll use that, or a 12-volt blender. So everything I use will be something I can use with my solar, and it's 12-volt. The kind of food, I'll go to farmers markets, and now that I've started to start going into some of the buildings, I can, go and buy from the grocery stores, but really I'd prefer farmers markets because I'm still reacting in stores. I don't know, is this a point in time I would talk about the other things I do to survive?
Yeah. Well, just cooking with the batteries, like if they have solar-powered batteries, is that what you're doing? And that's a very slow way of cooking, is it not?
Yes, it is slow.
So you spend your day, long time, trying to wait for your food to get cooked?
Yes, well, that, and, doing my laundry and everything. It's like being in survival mode. People think I'm on a holiday. If they actually spent one day or even a week, they might be exhausted just watching me survive.
Yeah, like how do you do your laundry? Do you have to find a river? Or do you try to use somebody else's pump in their yard or something?
All of the above. So I have streams and things like that. I'll actually drive like really far to go get water because it's like gold down there. And,
water.
So go, and then I'll find, if I can find a pump that's free, and you can't quite do your laundry there. Sometimes I try, but I'll go drive somewhere else. Wash the laundry, come back, get the rinse water. It's heavy and it takes a long time, and I do it with a plunger. It's quite embarrassing. So I remember one day one lady came up to me and she felt, really, really bad. Her and her husband were watching me do my laundry. So she came to me and she goes, we just want to give you some money to go use the laundromat. And I'm thinking, oh, where do I start?
Yeah.
So I explained to her, and her husband had COPD, and she was concerned about him seeing where I was at, and I couldn't use the laundry machine. So they came from far away as well. So yeah, people, it's so hard for them to even grasp the reality.
Of course. Yeah, but then if you're using laundry, if you're doing laundry, you have to have something to launder with, like some soap, or is that a problem? Or do you just use roughage, like rocks?
I've been using baking soda and then vinegar in the water for the rinse. I really can't. I try once in a while some of the stuff that's supposed to be scent-free or non-toxic. Anyway, I really can't. It's just a drop, and that's even too much for me at the moment. So yeah, the baking soda does as good as it can, I guess, at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and it's good that you're meeting some people that are sensitive too, that are concerned about you and noticing things. And sometimes maybe meeting people is not always a good thing. Do you have any problems with other kinds of people that are not, that you don't want to meet?
Oh, yeah. So sometimes when the hood is up in the van, really got to watch out who is asking to help me. You never know who's going to walk out of the desert. It's been a challenge with some of the people. I remember one time there were these two guys, and they said they'd help with the van. So I drove towards where they were in the middle of nowhere. And then they start saying, well, if we deem your van unsafe, you're going to have to stay in one of our vans. And I'm thinking, like, fat chance that's going to happen. So anyways, I just made sure I kept my let me see. I mean, I never had my back facing them, and I was pleasant enough. I didn't show any fear because the way they kept joking around, I'm thinking, yeah, I just got to get out of here. And the work they were offering or going to offer was awesome, but I'm thinking, I don't need it to help that bad. So I left, and I'm so glad that I did. There's just so many times where I have, things like that. So it leaves me very vulnerable, but it seems to be that I'm getting pretty good at getting out of those situations.
You have ways of surviving, I guess, the adaptability or whatever it is that you develop, and confidence too. But there are other things, like even in nature, that you might be you have to be careful about too, because nature can be dangerous. I mean, are there rattlesnakes or anything like that might encounter? I'm just trying to think of what it could be.
Okay, so I have to tell you about this story. So one day I was sitting there taking pictures, and I hear this blood-curdling scream, and I'm thinking, well, it's just got to be because of where these cactuses are, and they tell us not to get one stuck in our hands or anywhere because it just starts expanding or something. So anyways, I'm taking a picture, and I wander around not realizing it's the same area. And I'm taking a picture of this lizard, and I look back and go, wow, this is a big lizard. I see this big green thing twirling or lifting up in the bush, and I go, oh yeah, this is a good lizard, because I didn't hear anything rattling. I just heard a little buzz noise. So I thought. So I go around and I look down, and so my head pops out, and I'm going, that's not a lizard. And I'm like, I'm not taking a picture of this guy. And I slowly backed away, and I left, and I went, oh my goodness. So I thought, the rattling noise, like on TV, was a really loud lizard. But now that I know that, almost like this little bug-like noise, that I've been near several rattlesnakes.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. You're listening to CKUW 95.9 FM, aired from the University of Winnipeg. This is Wooden Spoons. I'm Mary Jane Eason with co-host Kristen Andrews, and we're talking to our guest, Marie LeBlanc. Yeah, there's all kinds of nature is full of all kinds of hazards if you aren't if you don't know your surroundings, for one thing. Mm-hmm. The other thing that really is an important thing is having an ID, and we were talking to Al Weeb last week, and he was homeless, and when he tried to go to emergency several times, he was denied treatment. And this the third time it led to a suicide attempt, and this is what he shared with us. Part of the reason why emergency doesn't deal with people who are homeless is because they don't have an ID. So how do you get an ID? We don't have an address.
Well, it's been quite a challenge. I have a lot of people who let me use their address, and when someone asks me where I live, I don't have a clue because I've used so many people's addresses, and I lose my piece of paper where I actually supposedly say I lived. but I have had a challenge, like recently, since I don't have that physical address. I ordered something from Amazon, and I made sure that the general delivery would take my parcel because I needed this certain thing to go survive in the desert. Well, they denied it. So I've been, trying to find all angles to get this parcel. I have no idea if I'm even going to receive it. So having that idea is so hard. Everywhere you go, for medical, everywhere. It's the hardest thing. So how I got my ID for Alberta was I stayed at someone's place, and I tried to. That's where I got the kidney failure. But anyways, that person said I could use the address so I could try and get like an Alberta health card. So that helped me there. But if I didn't have the people helping me, or, I don't know what somebody would do. It is so hard to have to keep proving where I live and that I'm a citizen and not getting any service. So I feel so bad for the people who can't even get as far as I did.
Yeah, that is very frustrating for sure, and it's not something that can easily be corrected. And thank goodness there's always something that comes to maybe intervene and that you get the help you need. Do you feel that's the case? That you always get what you need to survive?
Just enough. It seems like just sometimes just enough. It just comes to me, and people say, we're praying for you. We just don't know how all these things come to you or how I'm even doing this. And they just say how resourceful I am. But, boy, you have to be resourceful, and there's a lot of bartering that goes on.
Yeah, so, that's wonderful. But, you are living on the edge for sure. But it's good to have friends that are supporting you and offer their prayers for you, that there is power in that. I do believe that's very important. And, you are connected maybe to people like yourself because you have the technology. Obviously, you're talking on the phone here. How do you manage that? You have you're very adept at technology. So how do you do that? What can you do?
Well, I haven't figured out the best way yet. So after today, I'll probably rest. Like, I've had a lot of cell time with different meetings and things. And yesterday was like the last couple of days between fragrance and cell towers. I tell you, I've been so sick. So
where were you in the last couple of days? You were not in your regular place of safer space?
Well, I had some meetings and things, and they wanted I needed really good cell reception, so I made sure I was in good cell reception too. And yeah, there's places I had to go, like different stores. There's been a lot of exposure, so it's been really, really hard. So unfortunately, I can't attach a landline to the van. That would be awesome, but that's the biggest challenge. So yeah, it's been really, really hard. And a lot of times I just I'll turn off my phone and I'll, go back on, check it, turn it off. And probably even just turning it on and off is the biggest challenge too. But yeah, my head is pounding, and I was so sick the last few days, and I'll probably just go back to bed after this. It's such a challenge. I don't even know how people are supposed to survive in the modern world if they have, environmental sensitivities such as myself, and even when they're worse than me.
Yes, and the other thing is that we are going to see more people with chemical sensitivities as they are going to be rolling out 5G. We can expect that there are going to be a lot of fallout from that, and it's really scary. So people, you are such a minority, the people who have these sensitivities, but there is a growing number of them, I believe, and the number is great enough so that they can actually advocate for themselves. Is that not true?
Oh, yeah. Yes, the number is, I would say, pretty high. Even if you say 3%, I can't remember what the person said in the meeting, what it was in Winnipeg, if you took the 3%, like in the meeting at City Hall earlier this week. And I thought that's a pretty large number of people that are being left behind.
Are you able to vote?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yes, I am.
Okay, because you have an ID.
Because I have an ID. That's funny because yes, where I forgot. So where I had my driver's license, and I wasn't living there, but they said, well, a voting card came in. And I thought, well, that's weird. I haven't received a voting card for a long time.
Well, good for you. This is just so surreal. Now, I just want to talk to you about your own living in a van itself. How is your van doing in terms of its wear and tear, and how good is it working?
I think my van is saying SOS on it, or maybe I should just put a sign that says that. Some people think it's not so bad, but maybe it's really hard because if the hood is always up and it's always stuck in the desert, to me it's that bad. And I took it to one place and they said thousands of dollars to fix, just get a different one. Actually, several places have said that. It's easier to get my van looked at down in Arizona because they're used to old jalopies like mine, but here it's so much of a challenge to have my van looked at and so expensive. So my right now my van has been in one place several days. I just keep bringing it back, and it's just always a challenge. So I'm having that GoFundMe happening right now, and hopefully I can get something different maybe next year.
So this GoFundMe, if people go to your website, they can donate. towards getting you a better vehicle?
Yes, they can. They could go to marieleblanc.net, like think of a fishing net, because I think there's a .org. So yeah, marieleblanc.net, and they can go there and donate, and hopefully, something comes in the works next year, because I really don't know how this ban is going to fare for another year. I can't tell you how much, and it leaks all the time. I can't tell you how much caulking I had to spend money on to make it look like I've iced the van with caulking. But anyway, so it wouldn't leak. And I spent probably a couple $100 just for that. It's expensive to maintain the van, and people think I have lots of money because I don't have to spend anything on rent. My van is probably more than rent sometimes.
Well, you would have to be given a disability or something, like you must have where do you get your money from? Like, you have to have a mailbox.
Yeah, well,
to receive something.
Oh, yes. Well, then they've provided an address for them, and they know that, so I'm pretty honest with them.
Okay.
They know, yeah, so that makes it a challenge. My biggest challenge when I went from Manitoba to Alberta was I lost my disability while I was seeking medical treatment in Alberta. So it took me 2 years. Now imagine that's 2 years without provincial disability and money, a bunch of money coming in. Not that it's a bunch of money, but and I had to make it work on the streets of Edmonton. I found some people with MCS there, helped out different people. They helped me. And then I was, told to go to the desert because I had the kidney failure in that one place I tried to stay in. Try going to the desert on basically nothing. So they had a lot of bartering. And then while I was in the desert the first time, apparently COVID was starting to happen. And disability said for me, I had to come back to Canada in the middle of winter because they weren't going to give it to me until I crossed the border. And I'm thinking, I have no heat in my van. There's no way I'm coming up to Canada in the middle of winter. So by the time I came back to Canada, which was a challenge because I could not cross the border because I didn't have the proper quarantine because I live in my van, but I was prepared. I had 14 days of food. I had my solar cooker. I had my shovel. I had a piece of land all figured out, and they said they couldn't let me across, so I got sent back to the States, tweeted something, and someone from Saskatchewan said I could stay in their place to quarantine. But yeah, it's been a challenge. So
yeah, absolutely.
And proving where I live was the biggest thing.
The bureaucracy is not a friend at all. The bureaucracy.
I know.
And as far as COVID is concerned, you probably are of little risk of getting it or spreading it because you don't see people or are not really in contact with people. Am I right? Well, actually, the first year, I'm pretty sure I had it because I never had anything like it in my life. My lungs felt like glass when I was breathing. And, other things were happening with my body, and I was lucky I had like a nebulizer, and I had my things that I had to cope with it. Yeah, because if you were sick, you don't go into a hospital.
No, and I wouldn't have been anyways. I would have got so much sicker, and yeah, it was really.
Yeah, the hospitals definitely would make you sicker because if you're sensitive to all the things that are in the hospital, besides everything else, that wouldn't be the place for you to be, for sure.
Yeah, and then some doctors' offices I have to go into because they won't see me unless I go in, and then of course I go in and I'm reacting, and then they think I'm drunk. They think this, or whatever, and I'm like, no, just reacting to your cleaning chemicals,
Yeah, and that's very real. There are a lot of people that I remember one lady working in the Health Sciences Center reported in the news she died because of exposure to the chemicals she was forced to work with.
Oh, no.
That is. But anyway, Marie, maybe one last thing. You were having a show, and it's a group exhibition called Make Do, and it's put on by Arts Accessibility Network Manitoba. You were involved in that, amongst other people. Do you want to tell us about that and when it's playing and how people can get to see it?
Okay. Make Do, so it's like MAKE and then with that /DO. You'll find it on the internet. There were 8 artists, including myself, involved in a mentorship through Arts and Accessibility Network Manitoba in the art program mentorship called Art Salon. Yvette Scenerini was our mentor, and she helped me so much. It was just awesome. It was funded by the Manitoba Arts Council. It's going on now during Culture Days, and it refers to like both the artist's way of life and to the balancing of gifts and struggles that bring that living with differences entails. So that kind of fits me to a T, because you could see, like, when you go to the art show, you'll see my work on there, which is the previous work from Overdressed that we had, the art show that I had in May. And all the images are printed, all 77, based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I performed every task in an evening gown in this art show and presented it in the art show there. And it's at La Maison des Artistes Visuels on Provencher, 219 Provencher.
So people can register to go to that show?
Yeah, they can just go to the show. I did have the hours written down, but I don't. Oh, Wednesday to Friday, 11 to 4:30. Saturday, 11 to 4. And I think you have to have the. I'm not sure if you have to have the COVID shot for that. I'm not sure. I
believe so. I think you can't go anywhere unless you're double vaxxed. Put it that way.
Okay. And then I had a grant through MAWA and Arts and Accessibility Network, and I can't tell you where I would even be if I didn't have Arts and Accessibility Network to share my art and share my stories and share the stories of so many others. That's what's keeping me going.
Yes, because you have quite a collection of your print art.
Yeah. So they printed, so all 77, like, they're printed in like 4x6s, like all the ones I had in the art show, and then we took a triangle just to represent the hierarchy of needs, like from the lace from my dress, and put it on over top of the images. It's kind of cool.
Oh, wow. It sounds very, very intriguing. And I'd like to thank you this morning for joining us this morning. And and I hope that you get a lot of people taking in your show, Make Do. And it's going to be running until October the 9th. So thanks again, Marie, for joining us. It's been nice talking to you.
You too. Thank you so much.
Okay, so...
And with that, Mary Jane, I know there was several suggestions for songs this morning, so I wonder if our guest is still on the line, if she might want to choose one of the several suggestions, or maybe one of those suggestions was yours.
You can pick whatever, because I can't choose. They're all good.
Ugana has to make the choice.
I can't.
Well, then Ugana.
Leave it up to Ugana.
Yeah.
Unmistakable voice of Harry Nilsson with his song "Everybody's Talking." And if I may, Mary Jane, I'm going to bring us back to what we had talked about at the top of the show, when we just sort of were recounting some of the sights and the sounds of yesterday. If folks haven't taken the time to read through all 94 calls to action put out by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, based here in Winnipeg all those years ago, I thought I'd like to just read really quickly action point number 22, and this is from the section on health, and it simply says, "We call upon those who can effect change within the Canadian healthcare system to recognize the value of Aboriginal healing practices and use them in the treatment of Aboriginal patients in collaboration with Aboriginal healers and elders where requested by Aboriginal patients." When you take the time to read through all of the recommendations, the 94 calls to action, some of them are so straightforward. Some of them are things that any single one of us could do and enact in our lives right away. And it begins with things like, listening and learning and actually doing the work in our own lives. But something like this, I know it's the healthcare facility where I work at, the residents there are allowed to use traditional medicines. And we've come to a greater understanding in many of our workplaces about the use of smudge, both for a meditative personal benefit, but also for what it does to the environment. So many of these things that are, Aboriginal traditional teachings and knowledge that have been passed on are really actually well well rooted in things that are beneficial to the environment and to us. So I just wanted to add that one in there. We've got about 20 minutes left into this morning's program. So as always, Mary Jane, you've got lots of different things to cover for us. So let's jump right in.
I'll probably not be able to, but yes, that's a very good point. Being able to use, Aboriginal medicines, that is a basic right, and it should be. This is a holistic approach, which is quite contrary in many cases to the medical approach. So I think that this is a great recommendation, because there are many more ways of healing than one way. So I like that. That's very important. I'm glad they're recognizing that. So, I'm not sure where to start here, but I was talking a little bit about healthy soil last week, and I think I'm going to skip the 5G because we're going to be running out of time as usual. But this Gabe Brown, he was a farmer that didn't know much about farming, but married a farmer's daughter, and he started to do farming, and he became an organic farmer, and learned by trial and error, and became very well known as a very successful organic farmer. And he attended many conferences, and one of them in which he met Dr. Jonathan Lundgren, and who was worked at the USDA Agricultural Research Service as an entomologist. And this doctor, he saw the farm as an ecosystem. And according to Dr. Lundgren, there are about 3,500 to 15,000 insect species worldwide that can be considered pests from a human point of view. And however, for every pest species, there are about 400 and between 400 and 1,700 species of insects that are beneficial to humans. So without these beneficial species, the food web and ecosystems would collapse. The bee, the beetle, and the butterfly, for instance, they are needed to grow vegetables and to give us fruits and provide us with flowers. And insects are the food also for many other species, including birds. And soil invertebrates are insects such as earthworms. They are critical to soil health. And new research shows that there could be as many as 1 billion soil invertebrates per acre in healthy soil. So Dr. Lundgren believes that insects are nature's pesticides. Predatory insects are very important to agriculture. If there is an infestation of pests, that's because there is a lack of predatory insects. And insecticides used to kill pests also kill predator insects. So this ensures that there will never be a population of predatory insects. So the important is diversity of crops, which increases the amount of predatory insects that can kill the harmful insects, and also not using pesticides to spray your crops. And that also makes the crops healthier because you don't have spray residues. And so that sort of ties in with last week's talk about the use of fungi in nature, the collaboration of fungi with plants when they associate with plants, providing plants with a lot of minerals, and then the plants in turn provide the fungi with carbon. So it's a beneficial relationship. But once you start using chemical fertilizer, the plants take what's just readily available, and then the fungi are starved. And so you decrease the fertility of the soil in that way. And so same thing with the insect population. So it's a new way of thinking. Insects can control your pests in organic farming. Yeah, so I'll just switch over to a topic on whole foods, and because that's what we get from our farms, and it has only been in the last century that our diets included a high percentage of refined carbohydrates. We're talking about carbohydrates right now. Our ancestors ate fruits and grains in their whole, unrefined state. And so carbohydrates is just one class of nutrients, and they are carbohydrates include starches and sugars. There are many different types of sugars. And they are all energy providers. And all green plants produce carbohydrates. They produce starch and sugar in their leaves through the action of sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water. And that's a process called photosynthesis. It's absolutely magical. So starch is formed when a string of simple sugars, glucoses, are strung together. That's that's what we get. That's the kind of sugar that our body needs. Is glucose. It's the primary sugar in our blood, and we are all able to digest the starch to release glucose molecules, which are then absorbed and via the intestine and enter the bloodstream. So glucose is a very important sugar that we get from plants. And it is only during the last century that our diet includes a high percentage of refined carbohydrates instead. In nature, sugars and carbohydrates are linked together with vitamins, minerals, enzymes, proteins, fat, and fiber. So you never see a single sugar sitting by itself. Everything in nature, in food, in whole foods, foods of nature, natural food, is intertwined. It's a network. So you never get, and this is where companies, food companies, or scientists, they like to identify the active ingredient. And oftentimes when they do that, when they find a certain active ingredient, it means taking away all the other interrelated compounds or elements that are with it. And that active ingredient may have quite a different effect than what was it first intended. So these things are all linked together, and that's what a whole food is. They're all linked together. In whole food, the starches promote life. The sugars and starches promote life. So if you're eating something sweet like sugar cane, that's a natural sugar, or honey, you're going to get trace minerals with that, and they will not have the effect of causing disease like other things would, like if you're having pure sugar that's refined. There has been a study done in Bolivia where in the upper mountains where a lot of sugar cane was grown. And the dietitian that went there, I read it in a naturopathic magazine, a dietitian that went there was expecting to see a high rate of diabetes because their diet was so high in carbohydrates and they had a lot of sugar in their diet. Yes, they had sugar, but it was not refined sugar. It was the sugar from sugar cane, and there was no disease and there was no diabetes. So that's just an example. So you have to not just take sugar that is refined. You should be using sugar that is more of a whole food, organic sugar that is linked with different nutrients, as trace minerals. Trace minerals, even though they are trace, they're very important, and honey. And so the digestion of refined carbohydrates calls on the body's own resources, our own stores of vitamins, minerals, and enzymes for proper metabolization. When we eat the natural sugars, they have those minerals and trace minerals that allows them to be metabolized. But if you get the refined sugars, such as white flour, white sugar, those kinds of carbohydrates, the B vitamins and all those things that are necessary for metabolizing the sugar is not there, so it has to draw upon the body itself. So actually, by doing that, we're depleting our body from these very important nutrients. So that's just an important thing that we should remember when when we're talking about whole foods. Mary Jane's Cooking School promotes whole foods as the basis of health. That is part of a holistic lifestyle. Having whole foods that is not refined, overly refined. So when you're having grains, the grain should include the bran, the coating around the seeds. Pot barley is better than pearl barley because pot barley has less of the bran removed than pearl barley, which has been pearled, which is going through these machines that rubs off the coating. So always remember that the whole foods is the key to health, and we do not need we won't be needing so much medical health if we take care of our immunity, take care of our health by eating whole foods. So on that note, I have a nice recipe that I enjoyed. This recipe. It's by Madhur Jaffrey. It's an Indian recipe, but it's a very delicious recipe calling for beets, and beets they're very much in season right now. And she calls them beetroot. And this is a recipe entitled Beetroot and with Onions, and it serves about 3 or 4 people. So I figured, I sort of calculated that it would be, she does it in grams, and I just use the other form of measurement. So you take about 4 medium beets, without the stems or leaves. They can be used separately in something else. And 4 tablespoons of vegetable oil. So vegetable oil, you could even use olive oil, which is a better oil, I think, definitely better oil. But 4 tablespoons of vegetable oil, 1 teaspoon of cumin seeds, 1 clove of garlic, peeled and finely chopped, 1 onion, peeled and coarsely chopped. So you peel the beet and cut it into wedges. You will get about 4 to 6 wedges from a beet that's about maybe 2 inches long. And then you heat the oil over medium heat. Then you add the cumin seeds and sizzle for about 5 seconds. Then you add the garlic and stir until the garlic pieces turn golden brown. Then you add the onions and you stir and fry for a minute. Then you add I forgot to mention these other ingredients. You add the 1 teaspoon of plain flour and stir and fry for a minute. Then you add the beetroot that are all cut in wedges, and the tomatoes, and there are it says about 8 tomatoes peeled. I'm not sure what I have here. Anyways, 225 grams of tomatoes peeled and finely chopped. You add that. And then you add the water. And I don't even know, I think it's half a cup of water. That you bring to a simmer, and you turn down the heat to low and simmer for about 30 minutes until the beetroot is tender. Remove the lid, turn up the heat to medium, and cook uncovered for about another 7 minutes, or until the water, until the sauce has thickened slightly. So that's the recipe, and it's a very tasty recipe. So it just calls for beets and cumin seeds, garlic, onion, a teaspoon of plain flour, and about a 1/8 to 1/2 teaspoon of cayenne, and some tomatoes peeled very finely, a teaspoon of salt or to your taste, and about 10 ounces of water. So that's a little more than a cup. So I hope everyone's able to follow this recipe, but it is very easy. You can just do that on your own. Cook beets and add tomatoes to them with these 2 seasonings, and this works out really well.
The beauty of a recipe like that, Mary Jane, is that you can actually remember the handful of ingredients. I love simple recipes like that, especially with all the fresh eating that we're still able to do out of the gardens. We've had such a beautiful lengthened season for garden produce. We haven't really had any worries of frost just yet, and we've been still able to just keep harvesting from our gardens. So something like that where you can remember all the ingredients. Beets,
yeah, and you know what?
Garlic,
I just have
a bit of cumin. It's so simple. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it is simple, and so it always works out. You can adjust the seasoning to taste. I also wanted to mention, I forgot to, time is running out, but today is October 1st, and from 5:30 to 7 p.m. at the Manitoba Legislature, there's going to be a rally to support human rights and women's rights in Afghanistan, appealing to the Canadian government. So it's put on by the Afghan Canadian Women's Organization. And so the number there is 204-999-2534. And it is today from 5:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. at the Manitoba Ledge.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you to everyone who's been listening from home. If you want to reach out to us, you can contact the Cooking School by Fantastic Fridays and our technician, Migona Chigbo. And you've been listening to the voice of Mary Jane Eason, community nutritionist, and the humble sidekick, co-host Kristen Anders.
And thank you, Kristen, and thank you, Marie.
Yes, to our guest this morning as well.
Yeah.
If you want to check into the archives, please visit ckuw.ca and look at the archives of this show and all your other favorite shows. You're listening to CKUW 95.9 FM, aired from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, heart of Turtle Island, from a broadcasting range of 450 watts on top of Evergreen Place. Have a wonderful first day of October.